Good morning. How is everybody?
Doing
Good. How about
good.
you?
I'm jealous. I can tell from your World Strides banner that you're in Washington and I'm not. Okay. My name's Rita McCann and I'm a lawyer from Huntsville, Alabama. I'm thrilled to death to get to be with you today and with my two colleagues. Gentlemen.
My name is Tim Moore. I'm from the University of Wisconsin in Madison at the Center for the Study of the American Constitution.
I'm Jack Barlow. I teach political science at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. Are you guys actually at a hotel in DC or are you out in Virginia? Where are you precisely?
We're at like an intelligence center for a Zoom call.
No.
in Tyson's
So
Corner.
it's an undisclosed location, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. Okay. I ought to turn this on you and say this is Unit 5, right? But I'm not going to do that to you. This is Unit 2, and we've discussed and decided question 2. So if you all want to get ready, I will read the question and then we'll get underway. When explaining why the proposed Constitution lacked a Bill of Rights, one Federalist claimed that in a government possessed of enumerated powers, such a measure would be not only unnecessary, but preposterous and dangerous. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? Why or why not? In your opinion, did the first 10 amendments to the Constitution sufficiently address the concerns of the Anti-Federalist? To what extent, if any, should we consider adding additional amendments to our Constitution? We look forward to hearing from you, and please begin.
Our panel believes that James Wilson's assertion that a Bill of Rights was unnecessary and dangerous is false. One example that he put forth was that freedom of the press was not a needed protection because Congress had no specific power granted to it by the Constitution to regulate the function of the press. However, the government has been able to impact freedom of speech as seen through the Alien and Sedition Acts put into place during Adams' administration. These laws placed restrictions on speech criticizing the government, which was dominated by the Federalist Party at the time. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison cited the First Amendment in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions opposing the Alien and Sedition Acts. Although these resolutions did not achieve their goal of getting other states to oppose the Alien and Sedition Acts, this instance highlights the importance to have a Bill of Rights to use as framework for when rights are violated. James Wilson also feared that the Bill of Rights would throw all implied powers onto the scale of government and the rights of the people would be rendered incomplete. However, we can see this problem resolved when looking at the interpretation of the 9th Amendment from scholar Randy Barnett, which asserts a safeguard against the very things that James Wilson feared. Barnett asserts that enumerated and unenumerated rights share the same importance and should be protected to the same extent.
Anti-Federalists did eventually get their Bill of Rights, but their views were not fully represented in the resulting amendments. Anti-Federalist 84, written by Robert Yates, promoted a Bill of Rights to ensure liberties for future generations. Anti-Federalists tried to design amendments that limited federal government power, returned powers to states, and protected individuals' freedoms from government interference. This was achieved with proposed amendments that restricted standing armies, decreased executive power, placed power for the elections in the trust of states, removed a national court system, and limited Congress's power to tax. However, Federalist James Madison omitted these ideas from the initial Bill of Rights and instead included amendments that Anti-Federalists thought were too narrow, leading to an Anti-Federalist objection.
Viewed today, the Bill of Rights did not fully address abuses to individual rights. It even conflicted with anti-Federalist ideals by failing to completely preserve the invaluable blessings of liberty as stated in Brutus I. At this time, a whole segment of the population was excluded from protections afforded to the rest because slavery was a prominent institution in America. In fact, multiple parts of the Constitution upheld slavery, such as the Free Fifths Clause, the Fugitive Slave Clause, and the Slave Trade Clause. Not until almost 100 years later was the Reconstruction Amendments passed, which outlawed slavery and promised equal protections. Historian Eric Foner argues that the Reconstruction Amendments were not an alteration to the existing structure of the Constitution, but rather a second founding. These fundamental amendments redefined the status of African Americans and the rights belonging to all Americans.
Although the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, our panel believes that their rights are still not fully protected within the Constitution. In 2020, Virginia, the 38th state needed to pass an amendment, ratified the ERA. However, since the 7-year deadline and extension imposed by Congress have passed, the ERA has yet to be included in the Constitution. The ERA is necessary in today's society as through the 19th Amendment, we have evolved to be more representative of women's rights. We need to continue this evolution of society today. Additionally, an amendment protecting women's reproductive rights is needed, as Texas SB 8, Oklahoma SB 612, and Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization threatened to undo the precedent set in Roe v. Wade. An amendment protecting the right to privacy explicitly stated within the Constitution would thus protect women's reproductive autonomy. We are now open for questions.
Gentlemen, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Let's talk a little rights theory. Does it make a difference? Is there similarities or differences between how the British understood rights and how Americans understood rights?
We can see there are many similarities between these two, as throughout history, we see through the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights that they had rights that protected citizens' inalienable rights. One of these rights was the right to bear arms, which we now see in our current day Bill of Rights.
Furthermore, we can also see a difference in the fact that American politics look to philosophists for some of their ideals when creating a Bill of Rights, such as John Locke and the pursuit of life, liberty, and property. These are key ideals that Americans make sure to follow even in the 20th century.
Today, in America, we look to the Bill of Rights as a framework for when rights are violated. However, in England, when laws are passed by the Parliament, the way that individuals will determine if the laws violate their rights is by putting suits against these laws. And so we see a difference in how rights are addressed in relation to laws.
Does it make a difference where you think rights come from?
It is very important that in America, we do have a predetermined Bill of Rights, as this really does act as a framework and acts as a precedent for when laws are created, and also allows for continuing additions to precedent. Whereas if there is not a predetermined Bill of Rights, it may be more difficult to distinguish what rights are available to citizens.
Although it does not matter where they come from, we can see through written and unwritten constitutions that these rights need to be protected within society.
An example of these rights being protected could be seen in 1969 with Tinker v. Des Moines Independent School District, as kids were protected of their freedom of speech and expression as they protested the Vietnam War with black armbands.
Thank you.
So you talked in your opening statement about the evolution of rights, that it's kind of an organic process. So I'm curious, where do you think the Constitution is in all of this? Should the Constitution lead our discussions of rights, or should it follow our discussions of rights? If we decide that there's a new right, do we put it in the Constitution right away, or do we wait?
I believe that this is a conversation in which we should wait until we put something in the Constitution. Even in Colorado, our Constitution is so easily amendable that when amendments are added to the Constitution, they can start to have less importance as they exile each other out, or they'll place restrictions as we grow as a society. As we can see, Colorado has a minimum wage amendment for $15, but as the economic crises and just inflation changes around us, that minimum wage will need to raise, and it will be a harder process to change that because of this amendment in the Constitution. We should take time and grow as a society and create laws and pieces of legislation that can seem to grow with us.
We have seen that judicial review, as established in Marbury v. Madison, has allowed to create precedents which then can protect rights. And this has created rights which are not specified in the Bill of Rights, such as the right to association established in Loving v. Virginia, where interracial marriage was allowed, and also in 2015 in Obergefell v. Hodges, where same-sex couples were allowed the right to marry.
Although precedents can be set, we see that in today's current society, Precedents can be overturned, so adding amendments to the Constitution would thus protect them even more and is very important.
Well, I heard what you said about the amendments being so easily passed in Colorado. Do you think we need to change the way amendments are passed in our country nationally?
This is very similar to the topic we discussed earlier, as with adding new amendments, they can contradict each other. For example, the 18th Prohibition Amendment was overturned by the 21st. This is an example of how it can be frivolous sometimes to add amendments if it's too easy of a process, as they could be more related to the current times. As my colleague suggested with the minimum wage, as inflation increases, this could be irrelevant.
Furthermore, I'd like to add, I believe the framers wanted the Constitution to grow with us and that the amendment process should change. We have the 5th article so that we can grow this Constitution and not get locked into a mindset that excludes those from the Constitution. So yes, the amendment process does need to be changed so that we can see reflections of everyone's beliefs and views in today's society.
One way to make the amendment process slightly easier is to not institute time limits on ratification. This did occur in the ERA, and it is the reason that the ERA is not currently an amendment, because as Virginia recently ratified the ERA, it has still not been put into law since the time limit imposed by Congress had passed. So taking away this time limit would allow for future amendments to be able to pass into the Constitution.
When you look at something like the Alien Sedition Act, right, where the judges failed to act to say these laws are unconstitutional, do you think the judiciary is really the appropriate body for preserving people's rights, or should our actions be done in other ways, through elections, let's say, or through majority rule?
Elections are an extremely important way for us to check our representatives. We see that the Alien and Sedition Acts were overturned by Jefferson when he came in after the Adams administration. And so this was a way that voters could put a check on this restrictive action from the government.
Although people and states are able to check the government, it's also very important to look at separation of powers between the different branches. And this check is vital, as it's able to keep Congress and their legislation they pass in check through the judiciary as they find things unconstitutional.
Adding on, as you explained, that if the Supreme Court should be a way to protect individual rights, an example of the Supreme Court protecting individual rights is Griswold v. Connecticut, as it protects the right to privacy for married couples as they have access to contraception.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about Madison. And you maybe hinted at this a little bit. Why does he do this flip-flop? I don't want amendments, and then eventually he says, yes, I want amendments.
Madison realized that this flip on the Bill of Rights was necessary in order to get the Constitution ratified. And this was very important, as they did not want to have a second constitutional convention as this would create more problems among the already prominent discrepancies within the United States during this time.
Furthermore, there was a fear at the time that Madison, if he had not flipped on this, the first constitutional convention would continue to go on, and they wanted to end it with a full constitution, one that made a severe impact and one that would be noted for some time to come. I believe that it is important today that some might actually argue that if we were to have another constitutional convention today, it would be a complete disaster due to the polarization and such, I suppose, just arguments within states, which is why we should look to state governments to control these issues, because I believe at the time states are not ready to come together in such a powerful unity because of how much disagreement there would be.
Ultimately, the Bill of Rights was needed for states to ratify the Constitution, and it is very important that Madison was able to put this document together in order to create our current form of government.
Let me ask you one more about today's times, and then the other gentleman may want to go forward on something else. With all the amendments that we have and the Bill of Rights, are there any rights that you have that you're concerned about losing? Or in the alternative, are there rights that you would like to have that are not enumerated in the Constitution?
In FDR's famous For Freedom speech, he mentioned freedom of religion and freedom of speech, which we can see are protected in the Bill of Rights. He also mentioned freedom from fear, which we are protected with a strong army. However, he also mentioned freedom from want, which some may say is not protected enough in the United States. This includes freedom to be satisfied with housing and education. And one way to accomplish this would be to add a guarantee to education amendment, which guarantees a baseline level of education for students in America.
Another right that could be in fear of losing would be the Fourth Amendment, as especially nowadays with discriminatory factors, many people do not know their rights, especially their Fourth Amendment, as they do not need to be searched or seized on, say, on the side of a highway or in.
Furthermore, as a young woman in this country, the right to women's bodily autonomy is at such a risk. And I think that that our government should take steps in order to, may I finish my sentence?
Please.
That the government should take steps in order to protect these, because so many women have come to age or have grown up in an era where their rights have been protected, and now it is at risk for being overturned. And the only way to truly and fully protect these rights with something in the Constitution, it would be such a shame to lose something that women have had for years.
Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen.
Jim, do you want to get us started?
Sure. I'll start. Your opening statement was really strong. I appreciated the fact that you said, hey, right out of the chute, the alien sedition proves proves that we needed a Bill of Rights. Although the reality is we don't have a Bill of Rights till the 14th. But I appreciate the fact that you configured the Alien Sedition Acts and the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions in response to. I thought was a nice configuration. I thought your reference to and knowing a little bit about Madison's let's screw the anti-federalists by giving none of their structural suggestions. Let's just go with rights. I appreciated that. A little caveat, I thought I heard you say that Yates is the author of Fed 84. Maybe I misheard that. But if you did, that's traditionally attributed to Hamilton. Minor quibble, don't worry about that. I would have liked to hear a tad more about the second convention that scared the daylights out of Madison and what really is driving his Bill of Rights agenda rather than amendments agenda. So that second convention comes up at the Philadelphia Convention too. So he knows all about that. So I'd like to hear just a little more history in there. But on the whole, this is a very, very solid presentation, and I appreciated your understanding of the history. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know that anybody has volunteered that we ought to have people ought to have the right to an education. I don't know that they've come out with that without being specifically asked, but you are right on target, as evidenced by the fact that you are all with us today and your parents are here supporting you. And that's real close to my heart. So great job, Jack.
Yeah, I thought the opening statement was good. I appreciated that you recognized that there was a great big hole in the Constitution, and it's called slavery. The Constitution's protection of rights did not extend to everyone. Still doesn't extend to everyone, and so I thought that sort of practical demonstration of the limits of a written document was a very, very good one and very thoughtful one. I pushed you a little bit on the continuing evolution of rights because, how do we decide, should something like same-sex marriage should that be encoded in a constitutional amendment? Is it enough that the Supreme Court wants to enshrine it in the Constitution? Who knows? Certainly by the time the court got to doing that, public opinion was in the court's favor. But do we want a Supreme Court that reads the opinion polls? That's an interesting question, and certainly the founding fathers did not think that they should be doing that. I appreciated the breadth of your information and the breadth of your discussion of this. So in the follow-up, we got to the 4 freedoms, right? And so you clearly have a sense of not just the founding era, but how things have evolved through the Reconstruction Amendments and onto the 14th Amendment, onto the 4 freedoms. So I thought you did a fine job, and I really appreciated the opportunity to have a discussion with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.